All right, awesome. Well, I'm excited to share this information with you guys today for anyone who's watching. I'm here with my beautiful friend, Melissa. She is a functional practitioner, and Melissa, please correct me if there's anything additional to your title that you want to add to that. But we connected through social media, and I have been so grateful for this collaboration because I feel like I'm learning so much. I hope I'm adding value for your audience too, Melissa. And, you know, today what I really wanted to focus on, because I know I'm talking to a lot of clients about this leaky gut. What do we do? What are some baseline things we can do to add value to your gut lining and heal it? And some small changes that can add up. And Melissa, you can certainly feel free to add in anything additional around, like, how does this happen? Where does it come from? Because I know as I've read more and more about it, I think most Americans are walking around with some level of leaky gut. So I would just love for you to take it away and share your expertise.
Awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, for having this conversation, right? Because this is something that so many people, I mean, there's so much information flying around, and some of it is directly kind of, it doesn't fit, right? And so it's confusing. So I really appreciate this conversation, and thank you for taking the time to do this today. I sure enjoyed talking about this. So first of all, what is leaky gut, right? So when we're talking about leaky gut, we're talking about excessive permeability in the actual gut lining, right? So it has to be a little bit permeable because that's how our food and our nutrients get from inside the gut lining, inside the digestive tract, out into the bloodstream, and then to our cells, right? So that transfer has to happen. However, when there is constant inflammation that is happening in that actual digestive tract, then the junctions of the wall start to kind of spread because of the inflammation. It gets lumpy and bumpy, and then things can leak out through that, those junctures that shouldn't, whether it's undigested food or food that hasn't been broken down enough. It can be things like bacteria, it can be fungus, it can be parasites, it can be all kind of weird things. But our immune system lives in and around this the digestive tract. They're almost like our sentinels. They're our police force, right? And when something goes through that leaky gut juncture that is not tight enough, then our immune system goes, all right, all hands on deck. We've got an intruder. And when that happens over and over again, we've got an immune dysregulation, which, if that's left unchecked, becomes autoimmune. And that can become, you know, these chronic disease patterns that we see. That right there, that progression, I hope can help you understand how important addressing that is, right? So one of the questions you asked, Melissa, was, how does this start? And I would love to hear, I'm going to share part of my story, but I want to give you kind of the science behind that, because usually if we are in a really good place, we're eating really good food as we're growing up, that doesn't happen unless there's some kind of trauma that hits our body, right? So whether it is emotional trauma, whether it's a car wreck, whether it's your favorite grandma dying and you feel like your life just fell apart, or if it's abuse, and it can happen at any place in a person's life, right? But usually that's what happens to really kind of trigger this. And it's not the only thing, but that's the most common thing. So when we think about what actually causes this, when there is a traumatic event, our body goes into full-on fight or flight, right? And that dysregulates how our body's digestive system works how our stomach acid is produced. So it's breaking down or not breaking down foods. Our immune system is also a part of that fight or flight system that's like, okay, gotcha, right? Our bodies are working so hard to just support us with whatever is happening. Digestive enzymes, the breakdown system inside there doesn't work right. Sometimes the gallbladder gets involved, sometimes the liver gets involved. There is a hormone cascade that gets involved, which think about things like insulin, think about pancreatic enzymes. Those are produced in the same place. We've got hormones that really, how can I say this well, jack up or kind of throw off balance how all of our body system works. In essence, that's where the leaky gut process can begin because of the imbalance. Does that make sense?
It does. And as you're talking, Melissa, I'm literally like, oh. Like, I certainly have thought about the logistics of, like I just shared with you, antibiotic treatment, things like that. But trauma and stuff, I'm like, whoa. Like, no wonder I always had stomach issues. Like, since I can remember, right? And I just always thought I had a nervous belly. Wow.
Nope. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because when you think about that and the imbalance that brings to the body, and then think about the immune system as part of that whole fight or flight response, and then think about if that is overactivated or just always on high alert, you don't have as much immune protection, if you want to say it that way, against simple things like a cold or a flu virus that comes and ends up being in your lungs and ends up being, pneumonia or something scary like that, bronchitis. And you have to have antibiotics, which are a godsend sometimes, right? They're literally a lifesaver. But then the imbalance has become more pronounced. And it just kind of begins to snowball, because often after that, we have quite a few rounds of antibiotics and our gut is off, and it gets more and more off, and it's hard to bring that back, right?
Yeah, I don't think I have been living through my own healing, which I know we've talked about, and certainly been doing the emotional work with my homeopath and but I, even doing that, did not piece this piece together. So as you're talking, it's like boom, 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 and really clarifying just a lot of pieces. And I feel like we could go for hours about this, but I'm even thinking, like, in my maternal side, there's a lot of type 1 diabetes. There's also a lot of physical trauma. So interesting that, like, there has to be a correlation there, right? And some people might think, well, that's nuts. Of course, type 1 is a disease, blah, blah. But I don't think so many people really understand. And I know Eastern medicine talks about this way more, these repressed emotions and what they physically can do to us, including, massive diseases, right? So, wow. That I literally have chills down my legs, because I'm like, oh my goodness. I feel like we did not plan to unlock some things here, but like, that's the
here we go.
Like, that's so cool. I'm such a fan of looking at things, without judgment, and just acknowledging and going, okay, that makes sense. Because for me, I'm constantly in this quest of, like, how can I just keep showing up as my best self and keep feeling better and taking better care of myself? But that makes such massive sense that, I had stomach ulcers starting really young, and it didn't make sense, but now I'm like, oh, right. So
yeah.
And I think a lot of folks don't think about that in terms of the gut imbalance, right? And I think, so many folks are living with gut issues that think they just have to resign themselves to this lifestyle. What are your thoughts, Melissa? And I know I'm kind of taking you off the tracks a bit, like around like this, we see a lot of diagnoses of IBS and Crohn's and things like that nowadays. Like, What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, I love that. And just a quick comment of, I don't feel like we ever get off track.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
I feel like we talk about the things that the people who are listening need. So I'm great to go wherever we need to go.
Cool.
So just to talk briefly about, IBS, Crohn's, and all of that, like we can break it down scientifically, right? There's always, the body never does anything without a reason, ever, right? So to break it down for IBS, Crohn's, SIBO, colitis, all of that, it is toxicity driven, it is bacteria driven. But at the end of the day, we can address all of the pieces. There's some emotional pieces in there, especially for IBS and SIBO, Crohn's, well, colitis too, all of them. There's emotional pieces, and there's usually some food sensitivity pieces. Like there's a, for each person, it's a little bit different, but there are some basics that kind of are there for all of them, especially with SIBO. The ileocecal valve is so swelled. There's so much swelling right there that valve can't close correctly. And we've got bacteria from the large intestine sneaking through into the small intestine, because the ileocecal valve is the kind of the doorway between the two. Yeah. And the bacterial families that live on either side of that door are completely different because they get completely different food. Yeah. So when that the bacteria from the large intestine can sneak through, it can just bloom, and it becomes a complete imbalance. But like these things are all addressable with herbs and food choices and some lifestyle stuff. But as the body heals, so does the mind and the spirit. So to just address the body, that's great. That's where I love to work. But as I've seen this for years, as the body heals, this and this heal too. Mm-hmm. 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 So when we're looking at the increased, how do I say that? It seems like we're getting so many more cases diagnosed of gut issues. A lot of it is the food, a lot of it is the toxicity, but I think as well, it is some lifestyle choices that we make, and we don't give ourselves permission, maybe, to deal with things or give ourselves time off, how to deal with stress, all of the things that are with us as a whole person. Yeah. Right. Because those things, quite frankly, can be addressed successfully, sustainably, and in most cases, completely.
I love that you brought up the SIBO, Morris, because I actually had that. I actually was going to ask you about that, but it was wild because what was crazy, I just kept swelling, right? Yep. And me, I'm really regimented with my food. I track macros, I work out a ton. And I was really confused, and even my trainer would be like, what is going on? Because some days I would just be so swollen. And so when I finally learned that was what was going on, I was like, what in the world? And it was just, a lot of oils, right, and capsules made a huge difference. And I did see that they sometimes use high doses of certain antibiotics, and I didn't want to go that route, of course, but I know some traditional medicine might do that instead. But yeah, it made me really aware of that, and just, it was something I had never even heard of before. You hear about IBS, you hear about Crohn's, but you're so right, and for me, it kicked up during COVID, where so many things were out of my control, right? I was really nervous about my small business, and really nervous about just what is going on in our world. And it just kind of tipped the scales, right? And it brought up, I think for a lot of folks, there was a lot of relationship dynamics that came up during that, and created a lot of awareness, right? And I think that's the key, is for folks to remind themselves too, is that we don't, it's not one unit, right? It's not our body, our mind,
it's all of us.
It's all of us. And even Arbonne, we switched our slogan a few years back to body, mind, soul. And I love that because it's really encompassing the whole being, and understand that, as you improve your gut health, your mental health functions, and when you really get into even the scientifics about how much serotonin is produced in our gut, how much of our immune system's in our gut, the brain gut connection, we could literally go on for hours about all this stuff, but when you really start to get that, then you go, oh, yeah. Like I laughed that commercial when I was little, the "You are what you eat," and I don't remember, it was like this little like cheese guy, and which is hilarious because cheese isn't really that great for you, but whatever, it was like the food triangle pyramid commercial, but it's so true, and I think that's what I really also try to hammer home to clients is like every little choice we're making is adding health or is it taken away, and listen, no one's going to be 100% perfect all the time, right? But nowadays it's so much easier, even with the cheap foods, to find a cleaner version. Man, like I know when I made the decision to cut out all refined sugar a few years back, because I literally just fall asleep, it just like put me in a slumber. I was like, what is this stuff? And, realizing like, wow, I used to just eat this stuff and not even think about that. Right. And so I think also if you're watching this and you're having any level of, judgment around yourself, like it's about, the progression of your journey with your health and healing. Exactly. But you can really change your life, even if you just focus on your gut health, right? Because it's going to show up in literally every area. Wow, that's powerful.
Can I mention something quickly? Something that I've seen often, and because we're told, and we're in, it's in the media and all the things we get around, always take a good probiotic, always, really work on building good gut bacteria. And I love that you're drinking kombucha right now. That's awesome. But what I've seen, especially in people who have like an autoimmune chronic type situation, even with little kids, like I work with pediatrics as well, is sometimes, mom comes in and she's like, I'm giving them probiotics. I'm doing 2 or 3 different kinds. And I've done this since they were 2. And then we do a GI map and their good bacteria is off the charts. They may not even have very much bad bacteria that is actually causing some of the issues that they're having. It's the imbalance in even the good bacteria. So it's a challenge to be able to, and that's perhaps something that I would like to lean into a little bit, because even when we're working on building good bacteria, the very best way to do that is with food choices and not necessarily a probiotic, unless you know what kind of probiotic you need. And you can learn that doing something like a GI map or some sort of a GI test to be able to see what's high and what's not, because there are some very specific strains of bacteria that cause things like rheumatoid arthritis, SIBO. If I see what's in someone's bacterial flora, I can tell them exactly how they're feeling, like what is happening in their body. How is this working out in your daily life? So knowing that is really key, especially if you're going deep and you're trying to really pick apart the pieces and figure out what is actually driving, like especially a chronic illness or chronic pain. That can be really helpful. So just some thoughts around that.
No, that's awesome, Melissa. I listened to, I love Ed Milet, and he had a doctor on last week. I can't think of her name right now, but she was talking about gut health, and she was sharing that too about foods, fermented foods, and, really doing it that way. And for sure, making sure that you're not just overdoing, that.
The good
and I
things.
think the good things, right?
Right?
And just being mindful. And I think too, it's fascinating. Like, I know when I look back, I was so skinny for so long, but I wasn't absorbing nutrients, right? I know we talked about that. So, there's so many factors, and I think people, again, there's this conversation can go on forever, but it really is about like, right, what are my goals? Where am I starting?
Mm-hmm.
And then absolutely, for any of you watching this that want further support, Melissa's a great asset to talk to, get a GI map, go further into these things. I have said to you many times, I wish I had found you sooner. Not that I haven't found wonderful people, but I think it would have probably reined in the amount of folks I needed to work with. Because at one point I was seeing so many practitioners, it was bananas,
Mm-hmm.
and super costly. And so what I try to deliver to my people now is when I find a great resource that really is an all-in-one that makes everyone's life a lot easier. And, and these are the things folks don't talk about, but, our medicine practice actually used to be much like this, and it shifted for really one reason, unfortunately, which is the almighty dollar. But, if we can get back to this way of healing, you'll find such a difference in your life. I'll say, my gosh, at 40, I feel the best that I've felt in my life. And I really mean that, like
Me too.
yeah, I've learned so much. And to be able to, like, even today at my workout, I was like, man, I just feel so strong today. And I'm grateful for that, because my story was often what you're saying, like every little cold would turn into a big virus, and it was just a huge production, and just constantly being sick. And it's really sad. I remember very clearly at the age of 20 thinking, like, this cannot be what life is about, because I don't want to live this way, right? And so so it's so cool for folks to think, rather than as I age I'm going to get more tired. I think when folks are feeling those ways, there's some key root causes going on that you really got to get to the bottom of, because you can actually keep feeling better, I believe, and I am living as I get older. I mean, I genuinely am like, man, like, my digestion's on point. I don't like swell up every time I eat something. I mean, I got to the point where I was like,
awesome.
I guess, like I can eat lettuce and water and be like, and I'm like, this is insane, right? So, which I know are also poor choices I made when I was younger too. So, I did want to just kind of, final thing, I know I asked you to touch on, Melissa, because it's an ongoing topic around gluten. And I know I learned long ago, I cannot deal with it. My body does not like it. I think many folks have that same reaction. I know a lot of holistic and functional practitioners say, just stay away from it. It's not worth it. And there's so many alternatives that are really tasty.
Right.
The world has changed since I first got diagnosed, but I want you to just share a little bit of your insight from your expertise about, is it wise to avoid it? Should we care unless you have an allergy? Like, what are your thoughts?
I love this conversation.
Well, let me just
right. So gluten is a big topic.
Yeah.
And let's start first with talking about what is a food allergy and what is a food sensitivity. So a food allergy is literally your body having a histamine type reaction to a food. So we think of histamine reaction be like a peanut allergy, and you're just swelling up, it's an anaphylaxis. But there can be lower levels of that. The second thing is a food sensitivity. This is a delayed inflammatory reaction. We can actually test this using a blood spot test or food sensitivity test, and it's an IgG reaction, right? Slower. That's a food sensitivity. And then there's a third thing that is literally your body not having the enzymes that it needs to break that food down, that food protein, right? So we've got kind of three buckets here. Gluten can land in any of those buckets for people. And especially for somebody who is in the autoimmune or immune imbalanced space, a lot of times if we do an IgG food sensitivity test, gluten is going to be on one of the higher brackets. Not always. So when your body is sensitive to gluten, sometimes it's hard to know that, but it's either a food allergy, a food sensitivity, or your body doesn't have the enzymes to break it down. If you have leaky gut, across the board, even if you don't have a food allergy, food sensitivity, or an issue with enzymes, which I've never seen that actually happen in clinical practice.
Ooh.
But hypothetically, if you're if gluten doesn't show up on any of those, one of the enzymes that our bodies produce as a result of leaky gut is zonulin. Okay. We can actually measure that to be able to get clues around leaky gut and how bad it is.
Okay.
But gluten, dairy, and sugar work together as a trifecta to create, how can I say, exacerbate leaky gut.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love that you broke that down, Melissa. And I want everyone to really like hear that, like that she's really never seen anyone not having some sort of response to gluten. And I know we've talked about, what we've done to our food supply and things like that. So that's a whole other factor. But I have an anaphylactic response to corn.
Ooh.
Yep. Which
that's
is
in everything.
Everything, right? The first time I had it though, what a wild thing. I'm like, I woke up, I was like, what is going on? I looked like I had little like slits for eyes. And my face was like this, and it was an undisclosed ingredient because I read everything.
Exactly.
It was an undisclosed ingredient in something really, really scary. But, I think it's important for folks to understand that it's just not adding health, right? I mean, I think it's, again, the bottom line, like this is not helping you. It's not serving you. And there's so many delicious and nutritious, like ancient grains that are gluten-free that add like protein and so much more value to your body that I know I have discovered. And there's so many great small companies. Like I love supporting small business, of course, and I found so many that I love. And so, I'll absolutely share those resources too. But, finding some really good quality foods that are just going to nourish you versus, filler. When we really think about, gluten, it's like, all right, it's like processed white flour is what I know I think of, right? And it's like, well,
there's not much nutrition there.
No. And it's so funny. My stepdad, I remember like, my mom started dating him and he had this, just like white flour is just dead. It's so bad for you. And, we used to laugh because like, it wasn't, my mom loves white flour. Right. So, it wasn't really something I was thinking about, but I think back now, I'm like, man, he was so ahead of his time talking about this really like 24, 25 years ago. And really just, sugar and just all of these things. And so, and sugar's so bad, my gosh, like, those are the things that people, it's starting to just pay attention and finding alternate routes, right? And I know, whenever I have a client do a 30-day, they're just like, man, I just feel so much better, and if they do have RA, I'm having less flare-ups, or, there's so many other things going on that are feeling better, or I'm less depressed. I feel like I'm more motivated, I mean, there's so many pieces to it. And I think that's really, I challenge folks to look at your day. I know for me, I used to have a real slump after lunchtime, but because I would eat something with gluten in it at lunch, right? And not even thinking about like, well, does everyone feel this exhausted after lunch? And then it's like, I shifted my diet around and I'm like, oh, like I have a very full day and I don't really struggle with energy levels anymore, but it's like, man, like what a difference. So I think that it's just, deciding what is the life you want to live? How do you want to feel? Right. And then how can I get there? And again, understanding it's a process, because while you're making these changes, things are healing and it adds up over time. So, well, I appreciate your insight so much, Melissa. And I know this is going to be a huge, a lot of value to my clients, but also, again, I encourage people to reach out to Melissa to, talk more about things that are going on. You've connected so many dots for me personally today, even though I've been doing work for years. So it's so cool that we can always be learning, right? But I just think that it's always about like, can I keep taking steps in the right direction, right?
Exactly. And if I could briefly before we close, just tell my story briefly, because a lot of times when we're really, really sick, it's hard for us to think about, can I be well? And instead of asking that question, can I be well? To switch it to, I can be well.
Yes.
Right. Because so I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 33. My left side didn't work.
Wow.
I could hardly walk. My right hand was losing functionality quickly. Like, I love to play the piano, couldn't do it. Just to lift things, I'd have to, like my cell phone, I'd have to look and make sure that I had a hold of something, had a hold of it well, because I couldn't feel it. Right. Constant anxiety, like, it was scary. And when I was diagnosed, my doctor had said, you're going to be lucky to be living at age 45 to 50. And I was like, are you kidding me? I had 3 little boys. And so I started, it was God, the universe, whatever you believe, was just really leading me to people who could help me, and started to peel the onion and really figure out what was going on with my body. And my body started to heal. And it took about 2.5 years for my last symptom to go away. But I've been symptom free. I get to live completely normal.
Gosh, Liz, I'm like covered in children. My leg.
Right?
Like, what?
Yeah, I'm completely free of MS, period. All my scans, all my blood work, like, I've been called a liar so many times by doctors when I say that, but I'm like, it's here in my, in my history. But our bodies are so freaking awesome.
Yep.
And when we can give them what they need, take out what they don't need and what's in the way, and create an environment for us to heal, we can. And that, I want you to just, if you don't hear anything else we say today, let that sink into your heart of, I can be well.
I'm tearing up because I'm just a big ninny like that. But I just
too.
like, to me, like, I know that is just because I get it, right? When you're at, when you really don't think there's any hope. And so there's always hope, you guys. And it's probably not, I'm not dissing traditional medicine, but it's not a route that worked for me, not a route that worked for you, and our bodies are designed to help. And, our world is filled with things that were grown and created to help us heal. Right. And I firmly believe in that. So, man, the amount of value in this conversation. I know we're going to keep doing videos like this for folks, because I feel like you and I together are really a force, and I appreciate that so much, Melissa. And I hope this helps someone today, and that's really the bottom line why we're doing this. So,
exactly.
So we thank everybody that's watching, and I look forward to connecting with folks further with any additional conversation. And Melissa, just thank you so much for your insight, your time,
you bet,
and your story.
My pleasure. Man. Oh, girl. Wow. Yeah. Our default, our body, mind, soul default is to be well.
Yeah. I know. We forget that, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, huge hugs, girl. Thanks for having this conversation.
Gosh,
it's exciting.
Yes. And I actually, I'm going to just maybe stop the recording, Melissa, because I just have